Hello and welcome back to Happier Ever After. Today we're talking about identity, not in a superficial sense, not reinvention, not finding yourself in the Instagram quote kind of way, but the very real, often disorientating question that emerges after loss. Who am I now? If you've lost a partner, this question may not arrive all at once. It often creeps in quietly underneath other experiences. You might notice it in moments where you don't quite recognize yourself anymore, in decisions that feel harder than they used to, in social situations where you're unsure where you fit. And sometimes it arrives as a sense of absence rather than a clear question, feeling that something about you has shifted, but you can't quite name what it is. If that's been your experience, you're not alone and you're not unstable. You're not lost. You're responding to a fundamental change in your life. When we talk about grief, we often focus on emotions, sadness, anger, longing. But one of the most profound impacts of losing a partner is the effect it has on identity. Because when you lose a partner, you don't just lose them, you lose the life you shared, the roles you held together, the version of yourself that existed in that relationship. And that can leave you feeling unfamiliar to yourself. Many people describe this phase as feeling like they're standing in their own life, but it no longer quite fits. Things that once felt natural may now feel awkward. Things you once enjoyed may feel flat. You might feel different in conversations, in relationships, even in your own company. And when that happens, people often assume something is wrong. Why don't I feel like myself anymore? When will I go back to who I was? I want to gently challenge that expectation. After loss, the goal is not to go back because the person you were before lived in a different world. They were shaped by a shared future, shared routines, shared assumptions. When that world disappears, it makes sense that your sense of self shifts too. This isn't a failure of identity, it's a natural response to change. One of the hardest parts of this phase is that identity loss doesn't come with clear markers. There's no funeral for who you were, no acknowledgement that something important has ended. And so people often carry this quietly without language for it. You might feel uncertain in roles that once felt solid. You might feel disconnected from labels you used to have define you. You might find yourself questioning choices that once felt obvious. This can be unsettling, especially if you've always had a strong sense of self. And it can be even more confusing when the outside world expects continuity. People may still see you as the same person. They may expect you to show up in familiar ways. They may not recognize the internal shift that's happened. And so there can be a disconnect between who you appear to be and who you feel yourself becoming. I want to say something important here. Losing a sense of identity after loss does not mean you've lost yourself. It means you're in transition. Identity is not a fixed thing. It's shaped by relationships, roles, context, and meaning. When one of the central relationships in your life ends through death, it makes sense that identity reorganizes. But because we don't talk about this openly, people often interpret it as something going wrong. They think they should be clearer by now, more decisive, more confident. And when that doesn't happen, self-judgment creeps in. Why don't I know who I am anymore? I want to reframe this gently. Not knowing who you are right now doesn't mean you never will. It means you're between versions, and being between versions is uncomfortable. Another reason this phase feels so destabilizing is because identity after loss is often tangled up with survival. In the early stages of grief, identity narrows. You become the person who gets through the day, who manages the essentials, who holds things together. That survival identity can be incredibly strong. It keeps you functioning, keeps you moving, it keeps you alive, but it's not meant to be permanent. As survival eases, that identity loosens, and suddenly there's space. And space can feel frightening because without the urgency of survival, the question arises: who am I when I'm not just coping? That's not an easy question to answer, especially when you're grieving. Another layer to identity after loss is how it's shaped by other people's reactions. You may notice that people relate to you differently now. They may treat you with more caution or with pity or with assumptions about what your life looks like. You may find yourself being reduced to a single aspect of your experience: the bereaved one, the widow, the strong one. And while labels can sometimes be useful, they can also feel limiting. You may feel pressure to live up to them or to resist them. And that tension can further complicate your sense of self. I want to say this clearly. You are allowed to be more than what happened to you. Your loss is part of your story. It's not the whole of who you are. At the same time, you don't need to rush into defining yourself again. Identity after loss is not something you decide, it's something that emerges over time, often quietly, often unexpectedly, often in ways that don't make sense at first. You might notice it in small preferences changing, in boundaries becoming clearer, in what you tolerate and what you no longer can. These shifts are not random. They're signs that your system is recalibrating, that you're beginning to orient to life differently. And again, there is no right or wrong way to do this. Some people actively explore new roles and interests. Others move much more slowly. Some feel drawn to familiar parts of themselves. Others feel pulled towards entirely new expressions. None of these paths are better or worse. They're simply different responses to change. I want to gently caution against one thing here: trying to force identity. After loss, it can be tempting to rush into answers, to decide who you are now, to define yourself in reaction to what happened, to create certainty where there is none. But identity that forces often feels brittle. It doesn't have the room to breathe. Identity that lasts tends to grow from safety, not from pressure. It grows when you allow yourself to be curious rather than critical. Instead of asking, who should I be now? You might ask what feels more true than before. Instead of asking what's next, you might ask what no longer fits. Those questions create space, and space is where identity forms. I also want to name something that many people feel but don't often say out loud. Sometimes identity after loss feels lonely, not just because you've lost your partner, but because you feel less mirrored. When someone knows you deeply, they reflect you back to yourself. When they're gone, that reflection disappears, and it can take time to recognize yourself again without it. That doesn't mean you're invisible, it means you're adjusting. And that adjustment is allowed to be slow. If, as you're listening to this, you notice uncertainty or discomfort, pause for a moment. Notice your body, notice your breath. Notice that you don't need to have this all figured out today. Identity after loss is not something you solve, it's something you live into. And living into something takes time. You are not behind, you are not lost, you are not becoming, even if it doesn't feel that way yet. If you'd like some gentle support as you navigate life after loss, you can explore the Life After Loss guide via the show notes, or you can check out the Happier Ever After hub at happiercoach.com/happier-ever-after, where resources continue to be added alongside this series. You don't need to define yourself today. You don't need to know who you'll be next. You are allowed to be in transition. Thank you for being here with me today. I'll be with you again in the next episode. Until then.